The difference between a low carb diet, a slow carb diet, a no carb diet, a ketogenic diet, there's so many different ones out there. I want to do this video to give you an understanding of what a low carb diet is and then what a slow carb diet is. But as I was starting to really write out the notes for this video and as I was starting to figure out what I was going to say, I realized that this entire video is ultimately giving you the formula of what I generally eat and what I usually do in a given year to maintain, different cycles of ketosis with slow carb and low carb and all this and that. So I figured I'd give you an explanation of that. But before I go into any detail on what I do, you have to have a solid understanding of what the glycemic index is, and you have to have a solid understanding of what insulin is. So I'm going to give you a brief crash course in that. Glycemic index is simply this. When you consume a carbohydrate, the amount of time that it takes to get in from your bloodstream into the actual cell, basically all the way from digestion into the bloodstream into the cell, is what your measurement of the glycemic index is. So something that is a 0 takes a long time to break down, or a 1 in this case. Something that is a 100 goes into your digestive system really fast and then gets into your bloodstream really fast and gets into the cell really fast. That's the difference between low glycemic and high glycemic. So we have to understand that. Then in order to understand what insulin is secreted by the pancreas as a response to carbohydrates. So when you consume carbohydrates, you produce insulin, and that opens the cell up to being able to receive nutrients. Okay, low glycemic foods don't trigger a lot of insulin response. High glycemic foods trigger a high glycemic response, trigger a lot of insulin. So the whole idea with low carb versus slow carb is talking about low GI carbs. Nothing fancy, nothing super crazy there. It's what's been touted for many, many years as really the healthy way to eat, eating more complex carbohydrates. But I go beyond that. I'm not just a fan of complex carbohydrates, I'm a fan of extremely slow carbohydrates. But first, I have to help you understand sort of the benefits of eating the slower carbohydrates. And the biggest one is going to come down to your mood, plain and simple. Because when you're transitioning from a low carb diet into a slow carb diet, you might feel some different mood fluctuations. And when you're on a low carb diet for a long period of time, you might find that you start feeling a little bit tired, a little bit woozy, and you start feeling like you're a little bit moody. Well, the whole idea with lower glycemic carbohydrates is it's going to help your mood by helping keeping your serotonin levels stable. There was a study in 2015 that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that took a look at, it was a huge study, 70,000 women, took a look at 70,000 women that were eating either higher glycemic index carbs or lower glycemic index carbs. It was a clear defined winner that the lower glycemic carb group had a much lower incidence of depression than the higher glycemic carb group, because the high glycemic carb group was causing this constant increase and fall of blood sugar, making it so your serotonin was doing this all the time. So when you're on a low carb diet, you're not producing a whole lot of serotonin. So what a lot of people end up doing as soon as they have carbohydrates, they end up spiking their blood sugar way up, and then it comes crashing way down, and they have these massive mood swings. The whole idea with the slow carb approach is to be able to keep your mind together. Okay, that way you can come off of a ketogenic diet and not completely feel like you're getting depressed and then super happy and depressed and then super happy. But I have to help you understand the full slow carb diet approach, because I got to give some credit to a man named Tim Ferriss. You've probably heard of him before. He wrote The 4-Hour Body, he wrote The 4-Hour Work Week. And basically, he's touted the slow carb diet as a big thing for him. And I've taken a variation of that, and I've realized that, wow, that's kind of how I eat too. So here's what I typically do in a given year. I'll go 2 to 3 months in a ketogenic state. I like being in ketosis, I feel good, I feel like my brain is functioning very well, I feel like I can be the best that I can be in the office, I can be the best that I can be when I'm at home. But most of all, it's very easy to maintain. It's easy when I'm traveling. But I also get to a point, because I'm training heavy, because I'm working out a lot, because I'm taxing my body, that I actually do feel like I need some carbohydrates, and I do feel like I need to restore. But instead of just going willy-nilly back into carbohydrates, I cycle into what is called a slow carb approach. So absolutely no refined flours, no white breads, no white flours at all, okay? 0 gluten whatsoever, okay? The proteins that I'm consuming are few and far between. Okay, I'm eating leaner proteins, I'm eating chicken when I can, I'm eating maybe even getting protein from legumes, I'm getting egg whites, all organic, free range, all locally sourced whenever possible, trying to keep it ethical, keep it as close to the earth as possible. Then Tim Ferriss is a big fan of taking 1 day a week and eating sub 5% protein levels. Okay, I don't necessarily want to do that every single week, but what I end up doing is by and large consuming about 15 to 20% of my overall calories from protein in the first place when I'm on this period of time. Now, the big thing that you need to understand about this is I'm implementing beans, I'm implementing lentils, I'm implementing chickpeas, very slow carb foods. Now, a lot of people will say, well, those are very high in lectins. Is that going to be hard on your body? The truth is, if you cook them right and you eat them in moderation, you split them throughout the day, you're not going to have as much of an issue with it. Now, another one of my rules to live by when I'm actually having carbs is to ration your fruits. Okay, you don't want to be consuming lots of fructose. I've talked about in other videos. Fructose requires a different delivery system. It utilizes the active transport chain in your body, which means you can only carry a small amount of fruit at a given time before it gets stored as fat. So again, a lot of people, when they come off a ketogenic diet, they end up eating all kinds of high glycemic carbs. They eat a bunch of fruit. They eat all the wrong things. They completely counteract what they were doing before. The whole idea when you're coming off of a low carb diet and you're cycling a little bit is you want to make sure that you're not having high glycemic carbs unless they are strategically implemented. Okay, so basically, again, what I'm saying, when you're coming off that ketosis diet, if you go high glycemic with your carbohydrates, you will rebound and you will not feel very good. The whole trick is to go very low glycemic. Okay. Now, in addition to this, when I am eating my carbs, whenever I'm actually on a slow carb approach, I also implement intermittent fasting a couple days per week. So people watch a lot of my videos and they say, Thomas, like, you talk about fasting, you talk about ketosis, you talk about different carbs, you talk about inflammation, like, what diet do you actually do? Well, the short answer is I combine all of them. So even though my videos aren't necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach, the videos that I'm putting out there are different subsets of what I do with my given diet. So again, to break it down, I'm ketosis most of the time, then I go into the slow carb approach, then I go lower protein for sure, I implement intermittent fasting during that period of time, but there's one other golden rule that I want you to follow, and this is something that I share with a lot of my clients and I share with whoever I'm working with. Never combine your fats and carbs. That's the simplest thing. Okay? Even when they're low glycemic, keep your fats out of the equation as much as possible. That's the one thing where Tim Ferriss and I kind of diverge. Tim Ferriss is a big fan of still combining grass-fed meats and still combining your higher fatty cuts of meat with different carbs. I'm not a big fan of that because I truly understand what happens with insulin. You spike your insulin, carbs go into the cell, but so does fat. So I just separate them. And if there's one golden rule that you can take from this, it's to separate your fats and carbs, period. Ketosis, carbs aren't in the equation, fats and protein. When you're on a slow carb approach, it's okay to eat your fats, but eat them separate from your carbohydrates so you're not spiking your insulin. It's all about insulin manipulation. And I guess that's really what it comes down to in this video, is you're constantly manipulating your different levels of insulin and keeping your gluten levels low or non-existent at all, and making sure that your body is constantly remaining susceptible to using fat as a source of fuel. That way, when you go back into ketosis, everything's gonna work just fine and dandy. So I know this is a lot of rambling and explaining some things, but I hope that it clears up what I do on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, and on a yearly basis, so that you can have a solid understanding too. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel, and I will see you in the next video.